Hello, Kipsters. Today is March 3rd, and we are going to be learning about our final three instruments of the brass family, or at least the ones that we are going to be learning about. Okay, so Monday we learned about the trumpet and the cornet. Yesterday we explored the French horn and the trombone, some of the more recognizable ones. And now we are going into the euphonium, baritone, and tuba. Now, the cool thing about these three, or the interesting thing about these three, is they all look pretty similar. They all have a very similar shape. The biggest difference for these three, I would say, is the size of these three. Okay, so when we're looking at these, be cognizant of the size. It's very hard to do so with just pictures because obviously they're not scaled to the size that they would be. But be aware that the big difference here between these three particular instruments is the size of them and also how they sound. Moving on to the next slide, if you're following along in the Nearpod, remember you're watching along the YouTube video while you're clicking in the Nearpods as well so that we can all be together as best as possible. The first instrument we are going to be learning about is the baritone. Okay. Now, cool thing about the baritone is it also is the name of the male voice. So, if you are a male singer and you ever continue to sing in the future, your voice will be distinguished between three different voice types, and that's the tenor, the baritone, which is what I am. I'm a baritone singer, and bass singer. Okay, and the bass singers, of course, are the ones that sing the lowest of the lows, and the tenor ones are the ones that sing really high notes up here, and not they don't have any trouble with it. Like, it's just very easy for them. And so a lot of the younger boys, of course, are tenors, but as you get older, your voice changes. You become more baritones, more bass, if you will. But do not get that confused with the instrument, the baritone, which is what you're looking at right in front of you. Okay, if you look to that picture, that is a baritone, and you'll see why all of these instruments kind of look similar, because all of the pictures, that is what they look like in terms of how you hold it, which is like kind of like wrapped around your chest. As I read about the baritone, it says the baritone horn, or sometimes just called baritone, is a low-pitched brass instrument, which means it plays low notes. It does have the ability to play some higher notes, but most of the time it's going to be working around the low note world. The baritone has more circular shaped tubes, where the euphonium has more of a cone shaped tube. Okay, so that means that the baritone, it has a circular shaped tube, so the tube is circular all the way around it. It doesn't get any bigger until you see at the bottom there, it kind of like it gets bigger towards the bell. The euphonium, which you'll see soon, it gets bigger gradually, kind of like the difference between the cornet and the trumpet. The tubing gets bigger gradually until it gets to the bell, whereas in the trumpet, it's a straight circle all the way. It's the same size tubing all the way until the bell gets there. We're talking about the same difference here between the baritone and the euphonium. Some would also say that the baritone has a brighter sound and the euphonium sounds a little darker, which is the same sense for the trumpet and the cornet as well. So the differences between the trumpet and the cornet are very similar in terms of the differences between the baritone and the euphonium. We're going to move on to the next slide. In this slide, we are going to see, in this video, we are going to see some baritone action here. So we have 4 baritone players and some euphoniums in there as well. But I wanted you guys to hear what these instruments sound like and get to see them in action. So if you want to watch with me on the YouTube video, you can go ahead and not click the video, or you can pause me on YouTube and watch the video on your own. Here we go.
Hi, we're Quarantine, and today we're going to play Super Mario Brothers, the main thing.
Good. And as you can see, or maybe you saw in that video, two of them had a bit of a smaller instrument and the other two had a bit of a bigger instrument. And I would say that the two smaller ones were most likely the baritones and the two bigger ones were most likely the euphoniums. Sometimes it's hard to tell, but I would say that size, again, is the biggest indicator of which instrument is which. They do sound very similar too, so that's another thing. But for you, just knowing that there's a difference between the baritone and the euphonium is a big step. Most people would see both of those instruments and think they were the same thing. You knowing that that instrument has two possible names is already a huge step ahead. Moving on to the next slide, we're going to learn about the euphonium here really quickly. And as you can see here, the euphonium has that curve, that cube shape. So I'm going to go back actually 2 slides really quick just to show you. You see how the tubing here is very small and very thin, right? All the way around until it gets to the end. Look at the euphonium and see that it starts small, and as it goes, it's already bigger right here, and it gets bigger gradually, even up to this part, bigger, and of course all the way to the end. So that's the difference between the euphonium and the baritone. The euphonium, its tubing gets bigger gradually the whole time, whereas the baritone only gets bigger towards the end where the bell is. The euphonium is a low-voiced brass instrument that derives its name from the Greek word euphonis, meaning well-sounding or sweet voice. It is often confused with the baritone horn. The euphonium and the baritone differ in that size of tubing of the baritone is typically smaller than that of the euphonium, and the euphonium has more of a cone-shaped tube, where the baritone has more of a straight tube, which is what I was just explaining. Okay. Big idea to remember there. The cone-shaped tube versus the straight tube really makes the difference in how these instruments sound and ultimately how these instruments look. Okay. Moving on to the next slide, we got a little different video here. It's a baritone, same guy, sorry. And I just want to see in this video, you see on the right here, the tubing, it's hard to see in the video, but the tubing gets gradually bigger on the guy on the right, and then the guys in the middle have a much smaller instrument, which makes their instrument look bigger. See if you can see the difference here. And you can even tell in the middle that the guys who are playing in the middle have a smaller bell at the top. And then the guys who are playing on the outside, their bell is, of course, a little bit bigger because it has more room to grow. Okay. Moving on to the next slide here, we have a quiz. Which instrument has the bigger tubing? Okay. Which instrument has the bigger tubing? Is the euphonium, the one we just talked about, or the baritone, the first one we talked about? Give you a couple seconds to think about it on your own. And the answer, of course, is euphonium. Okay, euphonium again has the cone-shaped tube that gradually gets bigger, and then the baritone is the straight tube that, of course, does get bigger towards the end, but it waits until the end to get bigger instead of the euphonium, which gradually gets bigger. Okay, moving on, submit your answer. Hopefully, it is correct. Okay. And then our last instrument we're going to learn about, guys, this is the big daddy of the brass instruments. As you can see over here to the left, the picture, it has a lot of tubing going on. It's really big at the top, and it has a cone shape too, kind of getting bigger as it continues to go on. Okay. The tuba is the largest and lowest pitch musical instrument in the brass family, and it is made of many large coil brass tubes. Okay. The first instrument we learned about when we started the brass family was the trumpet. And now the last instrument we're going to be learning about is the tuba. Now, the trumpet is the highest possible playing brass instrument, and the tuba is, of course, the lowest possible playing brass instrument. Okay, a lot of tuba players, they know how to play baritone, they know how to play euphonium, because it's a very similar shaped instrument, but it does take a bit of a more air here because of how much coiled tubes you have to send through this instrument. Okay, so you could be able to play euphonium and baritone very easily, but there is a big switch when you're trying to play the tuba, which is, it's almost as big as some of y'all. Really, if you ever were to see one in person, it stands pretty tall. Like it gets up there. So some of you may have interest in seeing this instrument or playing it. Some of you may not, but very big instrument here. Showing you a video of tuba, just to kind of give you a quick rundown of what this instrument is. Again, you can watch on YouTube with me, or you can watch on your own in the Nearpod.
I'm Steve Campbell, and I'm the principal tuba of the Minnesota Orchestra. I've been playing with the orchestra for 12 seasons now, and I've been playing the tuba since about the age of 9. I initially got interested because my dad is a tuba player and a band director. Okay, now the tuba, making a sound on the tuba starts with the mouthpiece. And a lot of people, you get the question of how do you make sound on a brass instrument? All brass instruments have a mouthpiece. How do you make sound on a brass instrument? A lot of people say, well, you just blow. If I do that, what happens? Nothing. And then somebody say, well, you got to push the buttons or the valves. These are called valves. Okay, let's try that. Blow and push the valves. There's something missing. So what we do is we buzz our lips like this. And then you buzz it into the mouthpiece. And then the tuba or any brass instrument works as an amplifier, and it projects the sound. So the tuba is like any other brass instrument. We're all doing the same thing, buzzing our lips into the mouthpiece through the tubes. The tuba a lot of times is considered an oompa instrument. You'll hear the tuba do a lot of this kind of stuff. And that's all fun. And I know I'm supposed to be a tuba player because I like doing that. I like being it's a tuba player's job a lot of times to keep the rhythm, be a part of the rhythm section of 80 or 90 people on stage. But we do get to play the tune sometimes. Here's one that I particularly like. It's from Prokofiev's Fifth Symphony. Thanks so much for listening about the tuba today, and I hope you remain curious about all the other instruments in the orchestra, and I hope to see you sometime in Orchestra Hall.
Okay, so as you saw, that instrument was very big. I mean, it was literally sitting in that guy's lap, and he had to twist and turn it, and that was a full-grown man. So imagine if you guys saw one of those. And of course, he had the top of the line tuba, so that tuba was bigger and more buttons than the other ones. One cool thing about the tuba that we didn't really talk about was that the tuba has 4 valves instead of 3. Now, all the other instruments we've learned about has only had 3, but the tuba has 4. It gives it that extra low note that it's able to hit, and that really does make a difference, being able to play 4 hands instead of 3, 4 fingers instead of 3. It makes a difference. Last video I believe we're going to watch, guys, so go ahead and follow along with me in the videos if you want, or you can, of course, pause the YouTube and play here. Good. And as you can see in that video, these instruments are very easily possible to play sweet and melodious tunes, and they don't always get that role when they're in the big band. They usually play like the guy was talking about, the boom, 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 boom. But very occasionally you'll have composers who make songs specifically just for euphonium, baritone, tuba, and that was a basically low brass ensemble or a brass ensemble. So just an ensemble, a group of people who only are playing brass instruments. In this particular case, low brass. Okay, and they are their own specific particular group, the low brass. And a lot of times you'll have the trombone in there, but they decided to just keep this into the tuba studio. But again, that was the tuba and that was the euphonium baritone in a group. I hope you guys enjoyed that video. I thought that was a very nice and lovely video. Which family does the baritone, euphonium, and tuba belong to? So we've talked about one particular family in the whole here: woodwind family, strings family, brass family, or percussion family. I think this one's a pretty easy answer for you guys to figure out. We haven't talked about the other families yet, although you may know them. We're going to go ahead with brass family here because that's, of course, the instrument families we've been learning about. Yes, they are all made of brass. And then the last one, which instrument is the biggest? Of these four instruments, the trumpet, the baritone, the cornet, and the tuba, which instrument is the biggest? I'll give you 10 seconds to get this answer correct. And I hope and think you all got tuba correct. Tuba is the biggest instrument. And I believe it is the biggest of all wind instruments. Now, I'm not saying it's the biggest instrument. Plenty of pianos are bigger than a tuba, but tuba is the biggest wind instrument, which is an instrument that you have to use wind or air to play. Good. Thank you guys so much for following along in that video. I hope you enjoyed learning about those three instruments. We are done learning about the instruments of the brass family. Now tomorrow we are going to work on just different ways we can tell if an instrument is a brass instrument or not, because there are some instruments made of brass that aren't brass instruments. Okay, so we're going to learn tomorrow about if an instrument is brass or not, and then review on Friday all of the things we've learned. As always, Mr. Isaac has three things for you. You are kind, you are smart, you are important. I look forward to seeing you all again in person soon. And until then, have an awesome day.